So being 7 o'clock, I'm going to call this meeting to order. You will not see the participants, so it's just us that you're going to see on the screen. So This message goes out to all the participants, and I'd like to welcome everybody to our first ever Zoom all candidates meeting, hopefully the last. The meeting is now called to order. I'm Lorraine Harvey, Chair of the Seymour Community Association, and I'm pleased to be your moderator this evening. Before we begin, may I ask members of our panel to mute your cell phones if you haven't done that already? So thanks. I'm pleased to note that we have a standing room only audience this evening. It was great to see the community interest. This meeting is being hosted by the Community Associations of Blue Ridge, Seymour, and Deep Cove, as well as Parkgate Society. And our thanks to Parkgate for letting us use their webinar program. For the benefit of those who are not able to participate this evening, we are recording the meeting and it will be posted shortly on the Facebook page of Blue Ridge and Seymour CAs, as well as on YouTube. So you can share this information with anybody you know that might want to view this meeting later. The candidates are kind of in the order they came on, so it's in no particular order, it's just random. The format of the meeting has been explained to the candidates, but for the benefit of our audience, I will outline it briefly. Candidates will have 2 minutes to make their opening and closing statements. In between, we will pose questions that you, our audience, submitted to the candidates, and they will have 1 minute to answer. Any candidate who wishes to rebut any comment of another should put their hand up and wave it furiously so I don't miss you.
Hear you.
When the time
Lorraine, I can't hear you anymore.
What happened?
Peter, are you there?
I can hear her all right.
I am here, and I can hear her fine.
I cannot hear Lorraine any longer.
That's bad.
But
Oh,
you can
now
hear
I
the
can
rest.
hear you.
Okay.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I was about to explain the timing to the audience and to show you what I have. When the time limit for speaking is approaching, I will hold up this card. Is it backwards?
No.
15 seconds. Okay. And I will then hold up this card to tell you that your time is up. Okay. We used to use lights, but that doesn't work here. You will have then 5 seconds to conclude, and our gatekeeper is going to shut off your audio for a few seconds, and then we'll go on. So behave. At about 8 p.m., we will change things up a bit and give each candidate the opportunity of addressing their own questions to 2 of the other candidates. The same timing will apply to those questions. And in the interest of propriety, please ensure that your questions are in good taste and are considered of the 90-odd members of our audience. Remember, we do have a gatekeeper, and his name is Peter. Once that segment is over, we will return to the questions as submitted by our audience. And by way of caveat, we did reserve the right to choose or edit questions for brevity, relevance, or to combine questions that were of a similar nature, because there were a few of those. That's it. So we're now going to begin. I think I'll start, just go across the top here. Susie, would you like to start with your opening comments, please?
I would be delighted. Thank you very much, Lorraine. Hello to everyone, and thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. My name is Susie Chant, and I'm your BC NDP candidate for North Vancouver Seymour. I would like to start by acknowledging with gratitude that I recognize we live, work, and play in the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. And it is with deep respect that I acknowledge the stewardship that we must all continue to practice in order to protect and preserve the environment. In BC, we will get through this pandemic together. I am a nurse working with frontline clinicians during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm a team leader with the community health program on the North Shore, and as such, I've worked in this community for over 20 years. I trust John Horgan and the BC NDP government to lead us out of the pandemic because I see the fantastic job that has already been done by taking care of each other, no matter what gets thrown in our way. And that is my commitment to you. And that is what our plan is all about. I have lived and worked and raised in my family in North Vancouver for over 30 years. Born in Lionsgate Hospital, my father was a principal at Lynn Valley Elementary, and I have been involved in many, many community projects, as far back as being part of the group that started doing the pathways at Maplewood Flats before it was a bird sanctuary. I was a foster parent to many troubled and suicidal teenagers for 12 years, many of whom were facing immense challenges adapting to the Canadian society as new immigrants. I have supported hundreds of citizens to become healthier as a leader of the Vancouver Sunrun clinics over the past 25 years. And for 40 years, I have served Canada as a member of the Naval Reserve. During that time, I've been involved in training and supporting Reserve Force sailors so that they're ready to augment our regular fleet. I've also been part of the representation of the Royal Canadian Navy in Vancouver, involved in many events that increase public awareness of the Navy and the Canadian Armed Forces. For the past 4 years, I was in the role of coxswain of the unit, promoting health and welfare of our members and ensuring they have what they need to do their job well.
Thank you, Susie.
Am I
Hey.
finished?
Yes.
I didn't
you
see
are.
the 15-second card, sorry.
Oh, I did hold it up.
Oh, my bad. Thank you.
Okay, Jane?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the organizers for organizing this Zoom meeting. And also thank you to the candidates for putting their name forward. In particular, our youngest candidate, Harrison, it's impressive, you're 21. And also a special thank you to Susie for her 40 years of service to our country. But first of all, I just wanted to mention that I recognize I made inappropriate and insensitive comments a month ago, and I've been beating myself up ever since. And I unreservedly apologized for them and apologized to Bowen, and she graciously accepted my apology. However, I hope people will focus on my record of compassion for those who need our help most and those most vulnerable in our community. I work hard for women and families and seniors and those who struggle with mental health and addictions, those who have been abused or sexually assaulted, our LGBTQ communities, and those with special needs. I have a positive record of delivering valuable infrastructure, services, and programs to the region and the entire province. I was born and raised on the North Shore. I lived here almost all my life. I love our community and think it's the best place to live. I've raised my 3 kids here. I'm a single mom and have experienced adversity and challenges, but I've given back to the community by volunteering in many capacities, including North Shore Girls Soccer Club, Boys Football Club, and Block Watch. And it was my children's education that prompted me to run for school board. I work every day to be a positive role model for my children. I'm passionate about others and making life better for my constituents. If re-elected, I will continue to fight for the people of North Vancouver Seymour. Thank you.
Clayton?
Hello, I'm Clayton Wellwood. I'm the Libertarian candidate for North Vancouver Seymour. And I grew up in North Van as well. I live in the Linmore area and I work as a project manager in the construction industry. And I'm running for MLA this time. I ran in 2017 as well under the Libertarian banner because we need life to get back to normal. Too many people in BC have little or no income because of the pandemic restrictions on businesses. Too many people are suffering in social isolation because of orders to stay away from others. Too many are suffering from depression, addiction, domestic violence, and untreated medical conditions. But a growing number of medical professionals are speaking up about these harms. Even the World Health Organization now admits that lockdowns may be doing more harm than good. But unfortunately, our government doesn't seem yet to be thinking about lifting the state of emergency. So just like an ethical doctor, government should apply the Hippocratic Oath when making public policy, which is, of course, first do no harm. And this is the philosophy of governance that I would apply if elected, and that's why I'm calling for a sensible and evidence-based return to normal. I also want to end ICBC's monopoly and modernize BC's wrongful death laws so that it's no longer free to kill a person who doesn't have either income or dependents. I want to ensure that freedom of expression is protected and give parents and kids more choice in education. And I'm an advocate of fiscal responsibility because I believe that piling up debts that future generations of taxpayers will have to pay off is immoral. In short, I'm for limiting the size and scope of government so that civil society and voluntary solutions have room to grow because I believe they ultimately serve human needs better than government can. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted,
I
Lorraine.
see you down there. All right. Hold this. There I am. Harrison, your turn.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm calling in today from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I have grown up here in North Vancouver. It's the community that I love and where I want to raise my own family. But I have been almost completely priced out of this community. Many young people are having the same experience. Before the snap election was called, I was studying to become a high school teacher. And there's almost nowhere in North Van where a young teacher can afford to live and raise a family. I find that completely unacceptable. The idea of commuting to work from another community is not any more workable. For decades, the North Shore has been at the bottom of the priority list for public transit infrastructure. This is not only affecting young people, but the broader communities. Small businesses in the area are suffering because their workers can't afford to live in the community, but the alternative is being stuck in traffic for hours every week. I'm running because I believe that COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to reinvest in our communities in this recovery, to build affordable housing and ensure that nobody is left unhoused, to invest in fully electric, accessible public transit infrastructure, to prioritize our children's future by investing in our teachers and our education system, to end all taxpayer subsidies to the fracking industry and instead invest in renewable energy. I'm running to provide bold, compassionate, and responsible leadership to get us through this pandemic and build back a stronger and more equitable community. Thank you.
All right. That's all the introductions we have, and now we're going to proceed to our questions from the members of our community associations. So we only had one question that was directed specifically to a candidate, so we're just going to ask all of you the same questions, except for the one and it's directed towards Susie, so I will get to that. So Susie, yeah, you have 1 minute, just to remind you. And this is a question for all of you. Is climate change a priority for you, and what steps would you put into place to address this in the crisis that we're in?
Climate change is, of course, a priority for me. I have daughters, and I have nieces and nephews that are young, and I anticipate I will be having grandchildren. And those people all deserve to have a clean, safe, healthy environment to live in. So climate change will always be a very high priority for myself and for the BC NDP. We are currently have the Clean BC program in place that the BC NDP has brought in over the last 3 years in conjunction with the Green Party, working with Andrew Weaver. And that is working on the premise that we will be our carbon emissions will be gone by 2050 in a steady progress forward towards clean and renewable energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. Jane, same question.
Sorry. I totally agree that climate change is very, very important. And I live my life trying to have the smallest carbon footprint that I possibly can. I own an electric car. I own an electric bike. And I try to do what I can to recycle and buy local and support our local economy so that I'm not contributing to the transportation to get items to me. I agree that the carbon tax is a good way of incentivizing people to be climate leaders. And it was the BC Liberals that first initiated the carbon tax. And unfortunately, the NDP voted against it, which was unfortunate. And I absolutely agree that we need to bring more renewable energy and support and use, sorry.
Thanks, Jane. Clayton.
Can I just hear the question one more time?
Is climate change a priority for you, and what steps would you put in place to address this crisis we're in?
I don't think that climate change should actually be a priority for the government. And the reason for that is the same reason why I outlined in my introductory statement, is that it's like a pandemic. It's a global problem that That doesn't mean that it's not important and that people shouldn't care about it. Certainly they should act on it. But the problem is that when government tries to solve global complex problems like climate change, there's a very good chance that they may do more harm than good. And so some of the measures, the very restrictive measures that I see in some climate plans like Clean BC, run the risk of impoverishing people or making businesses go under. So I think that what we want to do is open up the scope for voluntary civil society solutions that run less risk of causing more harm than they solve.
Thank you. And Harrison.
Yes, so climate change is a massive issue for me. It's what inspired me to get into politics. I was one of the lead organizers of the climate strike in September 2019, which brought more than 100,000 people to the streets from across Metro Vancouver. That was the biggest protest in Vancouver's history, and it was all organized by young people who were demanding that our government start taking more action to protect our futures. So if I'm elected, the things that I'll prioritize, immediately ending all subsidies to the fracking industry. I think it's ridiculous that taxpayer money is going to subsidize this industry. If the industry cannot exist on its own without taxpayer subsidies, we should be looking towards all other alternatives. We should stop forcing pipelines through unceded Indigenous territory without consent. We need to stop the logging of our old growth forests, transition to second growth logging instead. We need to be investing in renewable energy, not building any new fossil fuel infrastructure, and ensuring that no workers are left behind in that transition.
Just in time, Harrison. Okay, my next question is going to Susie again. This is to all of you. Do you support a third crossing from the North Shore to Vancouver? And if so, where would it go and what type do you recommend? Susie.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. I understand that a lot of work is being done on a third crossing. Bowen Ma has, in the last 3.5 years, managed to bring all levels of government together to start the serious work on looking at transit and infrastructure so that we can enhance our transit. I believe that a third crossing would be beneficial, but I believe we also have to be very thoughtful in how it would be implemented and where it would be implemented because of the impact on people. In the BC NDP, we want to make sure that everybody is moving forward together when we implement something and that the people that are impacted are involved in that process. So at this point, I would be seeking input before actually coming forward and saying this is what we want to do. Thank you.
Thanks. Jane, same question.
I'm absolutely an advocate for rapid transit to the North Shore. And I submitted preliminary plans based on Stephen Neweller's research from SFU. And based on where the growth is and where the commuters back and forth for North Shore residents and where they work, as well as workers that come to the North Shore, absolutely the best place it should be going is over the Second Narrows Bridge. And I've suggested that because the rail bridge needs to be replaced sooner rather than later, that there is an opportunity to combine the rail bridge as well as a SkyTrain to the North Shore. And from within the North Shore, I would recommend that we consider light rail connecting the North Shore communities to help prevent or to help people get out of their cars.
Thank you. Clayton. Can't hear you.
Okay. It's a rather specific question. I think it addresses a larger question, which is traffic on the North Shore. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't know if adding a third crossing is really the solution to the problem. It's possible that it might not help much because we have so much traffic along Highway number 1 and the main east-west corridors. So I think we need to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to transportation. So what I would like to see is BC get rid of the Passenger Transportation Board, which has stood in the way of developing private options when it comes to group transportation, such as a private bus service or minibus service, or deregulating the ride-hailing businesses would be good. And another possible solution to having more rational use of our roads is a system of modest tolls at major crossings and other choke points.
Thank you. And finally, Harrison, please.
Yeah, so this is absolutely a priority for me. I mean, we've seen for about 4 or 5 decades now, rapid transit to the North Shore has been neglected by our government. Almost every one of the 15 biggest municipalities in Metro Vancouver has gotten a new rapid transit project or bridge connecting their municipality to another one since the year 2000. And the North Vancouver district, we haven't seen one since 1960 when the Second Arrows Bridge was completed. So it's absolutely a priority for me. I think that the Broad Inlet Rapid Transit study that has been is happening and is in the process, I think that that's really important and that we should be following the lead of that, because we're politicians, we aren't engineers and experts on what the exact best solution is. So we should be listening to the experts on this, and really, but also just making sure that the money is invested to get this done as quickly as possible. Because I kind of dread to think of what traffic on the North Shore will be like in 10, 15 years when this project is maybe done. We need to be looking at short-term solutions as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Our next question is with regard to COVID. I'm going to start with Susie again. Due to COVID-19, the provincial government is financially assisting citizens to get through this unfortunate pandemic, and there's going to be considerable debt as a result. What will your party do to pay for all of this? Susie.
Premier Horgan has been very clear that the plan with the BC NDP is to bring everybody through the COVID with a functional and effective recovery plan. That has included $1,000 to families and $500 to individuals as a household augmentation over the next year. And that is with the intent of not only supporting those families and also supporting and stimulating the economy. Additionally, they are anticipating a $400 renter's rebate over the coming year, as well as freezing rent over 2021 and then capping rent in after that time. All of those things are there to help with the financial impact of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane.
Mute.
Sorry, is that for me?
No, Jane. Yeah.
Am I muted? Am I okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Way back in March, all parties in the House got together and agreed on a plan. It was an emergency session, and it was $1.5 billion for COVID recovery. Unfortunately, none of that has actually gotten to the people and the businesses that need it because of the election call, this snap election call. Funds from the BC government's $2 billion pandemic recovery plan will likely not start flowing to struggling businesses until the end of the year, a delay caused by the snap election. And it basically makes it worse for small businesses and people to survive during the pandemic because of this election. The whole idea was to go into a recovery for all of the three parties to work together, and throwing us into an unnecessary election is actually putting people out of business, negatively affecting people's lives because they're either not working or they can't. Thank you.
Clayton, your turn.
So yeah, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I do really care about government being fiscally sustainable. There's a lot that government can do to reduce costs. There's a lot of functions that the government currently does that I don't think are best done at the provincial level. I believe that government is there to protect the life, liberty, and property of individuals. So there's all sorts of different programs. You know, you could think of sport and tourism that, you know, the private sector and civil society can handle just fine on its own. So I believe that we can reduce costs there, but I think the main thing is to balance the budget so that we're not incurring debt and then paying interest on the debt, because that's a huge line item expenditure for the province. And to cover additional costs, we could look at opening up a little bit of our crown land for private sale. There's about 95% of the province is crown land, and some of it could be converted to good private use and pay off some debts.
Thank you. Harrison, same question.
Yeah, so this is a really, really crucial time to be investing in our communities. As the previous candidates have said, small businesses are hurting, renters are hurting, students are hurting. A lot of people are in a lot of trouble right now financially. So it's really important that we're investing in our communities. I think that the best way to be supporting small businesses is to ensure that their customers have money to spend. So that means looking at things like helping people, like subsidizing the cost of rent, looking at making early childhood care free across the province, looking at the idea of making public transit free for people under 18, giving a lot of these people who are really crucial drivers of our economy money in their pockets so that they can go out and spend it and stimulate our economy. And to pay for that, we need to be looking at who hasn't been paying their fair share right now, looking at who has money sitting in a bank account that could be getting invested in the community, looking at progressive taxation to ensure that our communities really are strong and resilient going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question of Susie. It was the one that was directed to her, and then I'm going to let everybody else chime in if they want to. Susie, the site C Dam has been described as a disaster both economically and environmentally. Please comment on how the NDP can justify continuing to support its construction.
Well, as you know, Lorraine, the site C Dam was actually initiated within the Liberal time. And a lot of investment was done in it, and a lot of work was put into it, and a lot of people were employed to create it. At the time that the NDP came into being, it was well on its way, and it has been addressed and assessed in order to see if we can make the best of a bad start. The government is very clear that anything that we do has to fit in with our Clean BC plan, which is the strongest climate plan in the continent. And we also want to make sure that these projects are fit within our targets and create real benefits to people in British Columbia. So the Site C, although it has started off very bad in terms of being a project, we are now in a place where we're trying to make it work for people of British Columbia in the best way we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane, did you wish to comment on that question?
The BC Liberals absolutely brought forward the Site C Dam. We want to make sure that the energy supply coming to British Columbians is clean and green, and that's hydroelectric power. And that's the reason why Site C was in the process of getting built. And you're right, it's got, offering lots of employment. Under the NDP, there's been some problems that have been identified, but the experts will assess it. The engineers, I'm not an engineer, I'm not going to make any comment about that, but absolutely, we need more clean, green power to get everybody off of coal and dirty power, and we should absolutely not be purchasing dirty power from the United States. So I'm a supporter of Site C and hydroelectric power, and I think we should be a leader in hydroelectric power and selling our resource to the world.
Lorraine, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Clayton, please.
I don't have too much to say about this other than, I recognize the current government's decision to carry forward on this project based on the billions of dollars of sunk cost. I mean, I work in the construction industry myself. I realize that once you get to a certain point in a project, it becomes very, very difficult to pull the plug for contractual reasons, for budgetary reasons. So I understand the current government's decision to stick with it, even though it may not be pleasing to everyone.
Okay, that's it. Harrison.
Yeah, so this was a boondoggle that was started under the BC Liberals, but the BC NDP made a clear choice to continue along with that legacy. Many experts are calling on the government to freeze construction. The project is many years away from completion. It's going to take massive amount of more investment in order for it to be completed, and it is mired with many problems, especially around geotechnical issues. So I think that it's really time for whoever is elected in the next government to step up, listen to the experts who are calling on them to freeze construction, and then really examine whether this project makes sense financially, environmentally, which I think that it does not, but we need to be listening to the experts on that and not simply going ahead with it because it would look bad politically to stop. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. This is another environmental question. We'll start with Susie. The recent climate fires left BC with the worst air quality in the world. Can each candidate justify their positions on subsidizing BC oil and gas and explain how it justifies the healthcare costs? And we'll start with Susie.
Thank you, Lorraine. The work that we did with Dr. Andrew Weaver on putting together the Clean BC Plan was significant, and the BC NDP has a place to be proud of that. Unlike the Liberals, we've got a plan to fight climate change, build a low carbon economy, and make life better for everybody. We know we have to meet our climate goals, and we need to work with industry to reduce their emissions, and that's what we've been doing. Through our Clean BC program for industry, we're helping businesses to reduce their emissions and continue to strengthen the benchmarks. A re-elected NDP government will conduct a comprehensive review of oil and natural gas royalty credits. And with that, we'll work towards a cleaner BC. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Let's go to Clayton now, just to give you a second point on this one.
Sure. So, I mean, the question is kind of an interesting one because it's drawing a connection between forest fires and climate change. I don't know, like if your house burns down, do you go and look at if you had your thermostat set a degree too high, or do you go and look for faulty wiring or something like that? So I'm not really sure, but I agree that getting rid of subsidies for fossil fuels is a great idea. I mean, this is just the right thing to do. We shouldn't be, the government should not be playing favorites for any kind of industry, especially not a controversial one like this. But I believe that if the goal is reducing forest fires and helping people's health by doing so, there are other things we could do. So there's a current practice of spraying herbicides throughout forest land, which is crown land for the most part, that kills deciduous trees. But deciduous trees are much more difficult to burn and they provide a good fire break. So we should stop doing that.
Thank you. Harrison, you want to be next?
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that there is a direct connection between the forest fires that we like, how big the forest fires are, how long they last, and the climate crisis that we're facing. So I think that it's really imperative that we end subsidies to the fossil fuel industry immediately. I see no reason why taxpayer money should be going to this industry that appears to not be able to exist without taxpayer industry, but it's also not creating very many jobs compared to how many jobs would be created with similar investment in renewable energy. I have yet to hear any real justification for why continuing to subsidize this industry makes any sense within the climate targets that we need to hit to avoid climate catastrophe. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple.
All right.
We should end them.
Jane, your turn. You're muted.
I absolutely agree that we need to mitigate the fires as well as the floods. Our poor friends up in rural British Columbia have suffered for years on kind of the climate change caused fires or floods. So I agree. And that's why the BC Liberals brought forward the Rural Dividend Fund, is to help rural communities mitigate these issues. And it was canceled, unfortunately, by the NDP. What I would like to just qualify is what we should be thinking about is supporting our resource industries to become more sustainable and more green, as opposed to having to purchase products or purchase resources from jurisdictions that are not as environmentally sensitive as we are. And British Columbia has the highest environmental standards for resource industries, and I'm quite proud of that.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Harrison this time. A recent poll indicated that 70% of British Columbians feel that mental health, addiction, and overdose deaths should be a priority for the BC government. Please summarize your party's platform on mental health, addiction, and the overdose crisis.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is a really crucial issue. I mean, we've seen more people dying of overdoses during the pandemic than people who've actually died of COVID-19. And that really just illustrates how big of an issue that it is. It's been interesting to see how quickly the government responded to COVID-19, and how it's been years now to see a similar sort of response to the overdose epidemic. So priorities for the BC Green Party: absolutely investing in mental health, especially focusing on mental health of students in our schools, post-secondary institutions, investing in more mental health professionals there, decriminalizing drug users, as Dr. Bonnie Henry has recommended. Dr. Bonnie Henry has said the BC government can do this. This will save hundreds of lives. Neither the Liberals or NDP are willing to commit to this, even though they're willing to follow Dr. Bonnie Henry on everything around the pandemic. So I'd be interested to hear why they aren't willing to do it around the overdose crisis.
Thank you very much. Jane, you take a run at this one. You're muted.
This is something that I'm very, very passionate about and have spent a lot of time in my political career on mental health and addictions. For the short term, what we could immediately do is open up the empty mental health and addiction beds that sit empty because the government has refused to funding them. On one day this spring, I called up 9 recovery facilities, addiction recovery facilities, and they had 126 beds sitting empty because they weren't being funded. So immediately, short term, we could fund those beds. Long term, we need a comprehensive mental health and addiction strategy that will actually help people get well, decrease the gaps between the system. So when people are ready to get well, they can immediately get into treatment, and then they can follow their treatment through recovery and to avoid all the gaps, which obviously decreases the ability for them to get well. So we need a comprehensive mental health and addiction strategy, and we don't have that yet in this province.
Thank you. Susie.
Lorraine, can I get you to repeat the question, please?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Did no. Where did I start with? Okay. A recent poll indicated that 70% of British Columbians feel that mental health, addiction, and overdose deaths should be a priority for the BC government. Please summarize your party platform on mental health, addiction, and the overdose crisis.
Thank you. Again, the BC NDP party is all about people, and I as an individual am all about health. And health is not a simple a one-layered thing. It is emotional health, it is spiritual health, it is environmental health, etc. Health and addictions are critical to be assessed and looked at in a timely fashion. I agree with Jane that there are a number of gaps in our system that need to be addressed. We need to move forward on providing opportunities for people to seek and get help in a timely fashion. And we will move towards that as together, because as a group, we can solve that much better. I personally have been involved in a lot of stuff where we're changing the health system to make sure that providers, to make sure that people are getting closer to providers and more readily available to our services are more readily available. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And who wants to go next? Clayton?
Sure. Yes. So I think the number one thing that we could do for mental health and addiction and overdose deaths right now is end the state of emergency. I mean, the level of overdoses that we've had during the peak of this pandemic restrictions was way more than the people dying from COVID. So if we end the lockdown, we can improve people's mental health because we allow them to get back to living normal lives. I mean, there's all sorts of people who are committing suicide, people contemplating suicide. This is a huge mental health problem that we have a very easy solution to. Now, the longer term solution to mental health problems is very difficult. We need to open it up to civil society to come up with solutions. But one thing we should do is decriminalize drugs, decriminalize all drugs. The Libertarian Party has always stood for that. And so this will open up space to have a more honest conversation about how we deal with addiction in our society.
Thank you. Harrison? Harrison?
I already answered this one.
Oh, you did? Okay. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. All right. The BC Supreme Court recently defeated Dr. Brian Day's challenge to the BC law that bans extra billing and the use of private insurance for medically necessary care. What is your view on that decision, and how will that view shape your input to the development of public health core or care policy? Let's start with Susie on this one.
Thank you, Lorraine. The purpose, the extra billing things, all that does is create a 2-tier or sometimes 3-tier system. It allows the people who have money to be able to get into needed care and needed services, and it makes the rest of the folks end up waiting, and sometimes waiting longer. We are needing to be able to look at healthcare in a way that it serves all of the people of our province, not just some of them. And when if we allow for something of that nature in terms of the third person billing, etc., what it does is it just creates too many layers whereby people can be left out and others may not get service at all. And I don't believe that is the way the people of British Columbia want to go. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Jane.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I would just caution that we do have problems with wait lists. And one of the ways that wait lists could be at least decreased is to open up the ability for people to get their surgeries done by private clinics, but publicly paid. And this is what successful jurisdictions in Europe have actually done, is done a combination of healthcare for to alleviate wait lists. So I'm not a fan of the obviously the extra billing, but I am a fan of increasing the ability of people to access their surgeries in a timely manner. And it's not fair that people that have, you know, WorkSafe BC claims are able to jump the queue versus somebody else. And it would be better if it was a fairer system and we utilize both private and public facilities, but all public paid.
Thanks very much. Clayton.
Yeah, this Supreme Court decision is very disappointing because what the judge essentially decided was that it was a violation of people's charter rights to be left on a waiting list in the public healthcare system for months or years, and to have the option of using their own resources to seek private care closed to them, that's a violation of their security of the person. So this is a terrible decision, and it should be reversed. I mean, to Jane's point, I think that having that private option there will actually reduce wait times on the public care lists if people are allowed to seek care privately using their own money. We already have a multi-tier healthcare system, and there are some really great models. If we look to Europe, if we look to Asian countries that combine private and public options and give patients real choice and real control in their healthcare decisions.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, so we've seen during this pandemic that private healthcare systems have failed us. The long-term care system, which has been privatized over the past few decades, completely failed our seniors when this crisis hit. We saw that they have been prioritizing their profits for the health and safety of our seniors for decades, and hundreds of people died because of that. I find it completely unacceptable, the idea of putting more of our healthcare system into like privatizing more of our healthcare system. I don't think that wealthy people should have faster access to healthcare, better access to healthcare than anyone else. I think that that's unacceptable. I think that everyone deserves the same level of healthcare, regardless of their income, regardless of their socioeconomic status. The BC Greens also support bringing mental health care back into the public healthcare system. That's a really, really crucial step. We also support bringing the long-term care system back into the public healthcare system. Again, a really, really important step. Private industry has failed us on these. We cannot trust them to keep us safe. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start now with Jane. With the target of cutting global emissions by 2030 to remain under a 2-degree rise in temperature, what bold action will your party take to influence climate change so our children have a chance of having a good future?
Well, the BC Liberals want to get back to being climate leaders. As I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we were paramount with the carbon tax and were made fun of and wasn't supported by other parties. So we want to be back to being a climate leader. We're going to expand public transit options, boost electric vehicle charging stations, and ensure a comprehensive greenhouse gas strategy that reduces emissions while enabling our world-leading sustainable resource development and Indigenous land use. We're going to be improving the provincial building code to maximize energy efficiency in a way that respects communities' unique geography and avoids imposing one-size-fits-all costs with minimal environmental benefit.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, so again, reiterating the climate crisis is really, really important, and our government hasn't been doing enough. So I think, yeah, key things, cutting fossil fuel subsidies, that's really crucial. We cannot be subsidizing this industry. We need to be looking at how we can rapidly transition to a green economy. We need to be setting climate targets for each government's term in office. For too long, we've had governments who have set climate targets that are 20, 30, 40 years in the future, and not creating plans to meet that, not being held accountable when they are not taking action. I want to see governments setting targets every 4 years for their term in office, and I want them to be held accountable by the voters if they do not meet those targets. We need to be looking at, rapidly transitioning our public transit system to fully electric. We need to be investing in retrofitting buildings to end the use of fracked gas in heating our buildings. We need to be all around. It's just, there needs to be a massive investment in this transition, and it will benefit our economy in the long term, put people to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Clayton.
So BC could cut its greenhouse gas emissions to 0 tomorrow, and it would make no difference in terms of the global climate. We're just a drop in the bucket. So we could do that, but realistically, our best path forward, if we believe that greenhouse gases are causing climate change, the best thing we could do is actually spark innovation for a technological solution that will deal with greenhouse gases. So we already have a lot of firms in BC operating in the areas of, of green power, of carbon capture and storage, and so on. So one route that we could go is to take the money that we're currently putting into restrictions on, on vehicles, on so on, to an innovation fund that would actually incentivize these local companies to develop a technology that can capture carbon and other greenhouse gases from the air, and to pay them according to each ton that they extract from the atmosphere.
Thank you. Last speaker on that question is Susie.
Thank you, Lorraine. Under the BC NDP, our province is a climate leader, and people with commitment to fighting climate change know that. Unlike the BC Liberals, we have a plan to fight climate change, build a low carbon economy, and make life better for everybody. We know that we need to meet our climate goals and that we need to work with industry to reduce emissions. That's what we've been doing through our Clean BC program for industry, and we're also helping businesses to reduce their emissions and to continue to strengthen our benchmarks, which I've said before. A re-elected BC NDP government will continue to conduct comprehensive reviews of the oil and natural gas royalty credits and work with the industry to become cleaner and to work towards reduced emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is, we'll start with Harrison. In view of the provincial government's substantial expenses caused by COVID-19, which taxes would your party consider raising in order to pay for it all?
That's a really great question. So one idea that the BC Greens are interested in exploring is the idea of congestion pricing. So looking at charging people potentially, like if they're going into core areas like downtown Vancouver, that will both reduce congestion and raise a lot of money to be reinvesting in public transit, walking, biking infrastructure. Obviously, a lot of work needs to be done into making sure something like that is an equitable program, because it is a regressive tax. Beyond that, we're very committed to ensuring that our taxation and the people who are paying for this for the recovery, it is a progressive taxation system. The people who are suffering right now should not be paying for this. This is a time when we need money to be reinvested in our community, not sitting in the bank accounts of multimillionaires and billionaires. So yeah, looking at raising property taxes, income tax, potentially a wealth tax, we need to be exploring all of these options and seeing what is best for the future of BC.
Thank you very much. Clayton, your turn.
Yeah, so of course, the number one thing that we need to do is lift the state of emergency so that tax generation activities, the revenue generation activities could get back to normal. A BC Libertarian government is not going to raise your taxes at all. We're going to cut a lot of them. But I actually really like Harrison's idea of congestion pricing. I think that this would allow for a much more rational use of our roads. Maybe we do something like get rid of the carbon tax, but implement this some kind of system of modest tolls so that we could deal with the traffic problem and have a source of revenue. But yeah, increasing taxes is only going to embolden future governments to grow their payrolls, to spend more money, and ultimately get the province in more debt. So raising taxes to pay for the fiscal malfeasance that we're seeing right now is not the right solution.
Oh, thank you. Okay, Susie.
Thank you, Lorraine. I must admit that as a new candidate, the area of, and a nurse, the area of tax revenues is quite murky to me. So I do hear what Harrison has to say about exploring all options, because these things need to be assessed and addressed within the fiscal capacity of the people that are involved. So, and all tax issues would be looked at, and the best decisions made including the people that it impacts, which is the way we want to move everybody forward together within the province. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. This will be the last question before you guys get a chance to ask some questions, and I'm going to start it with Jane.
Lorraine, I didn't get a chance to answer that last question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then it's your turn then.
Okay. Since the NDP has become in government since 2017, they have either increased or instigated 23 new taxes. This is negatively affecting the affordability in the province. What the BC Liberals have proposed, if elected, is to actually cut the PST for 1 year to stimulate the economy and get people spending and supporting our small businesses who are suffering. The BC Liberals has also proposed to eliminate the small business income tax. We need to get the economy started. There is part of the recovery from COVID, and simply taxing people with no benefit is not going to help our recovery. So if we can stimulate the economy and get people buying again and feeling confident and getting back to work, then that is the ideal situation to do at this particular point.
Thank you.
I don't know how the rebuttal system is working, but can I rebut
yeah,
that
you
by any
can.
chance? Awesome.
1 minute.
Yes, so my question is pretty simple, which is studies have shown that cutting the PST will take out somewhere from like $7 to $11 billion from the BC government's revenue. So what is going to be cut in order for that to happen? I think that now is the time that we need to be reinvesting more money into our communities, not taking money out of funding crucial services during this recovery. So where is that money coming from? And yet what service is going to be cut? That's, yeah.
You're finished? Okay. All right. This will be the last question before you get to ask questions of one another. 2 questions each to different people. I'm going to start this one with Jane. Systemic racism, sexism, and homophobia are topics that are currently being much debated both in BC and in the rest of the world. If elected, what would you do in terms of policy to help eradicate attitudes that negatively impact mostly women and discourage them from entering public life?
Thank you for the question, and it's very important. The BC Liberals have said in their platform that they will enable policies cross-government to eliminate racism. We know that there's a study going on right now with regards to racism in the healthcare system. I support that. There's been many studies that have said, or actually anecdotal reports that say that this is an issue in our healthcare system. I have worked very tirelessly to support people within our community that are more marginalized. I mentioned in my earlier remarks for the LGBTQ community, I have a very good record in supporting the LGBTQ community, and we need to do better for all people so that we are all equal and everybody gets a chance to get ahead.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, so this is obviously a really, really crucial issue. And the first thing I want to highlight is just that calling a snap election is really, really bad for diversity. A lot of, whether it's racialized people, single mothers, so many people whose voices we need in politics are shut out by calling a snap election. Those people can't drop their entire life within a week to run, as many people have had to run in this election. We need to be doing everything we can to ensure that there is a diversity of voices within BC politics. We've seen both parties have had issues with this, have had, whether it's Indigenous candidates, female candidates, who have had issues getting party nominations. The BC NDP broke their own rules to instate a white male candidate over an Indigenous female candidate. That's very worrisome to me. My entire campaign team is young women, non-binary people. These are the people we need to be propping up, giving voice within our society. Politics.
Thank you very much. Clayton.
Can I hear the question again, please?
Sure. Systemic racism, sexism, and homophobia are topics that are currently being much debated both in BC and in the rest of the world. If elected, what would you do in terms of policy to help eradicate attitudes that negatively affect mostly women and discourage them from entering public life?
This is a difficult one. Yes, bigotry still exists in many forms in our society. I believe that as a society, we are progressing to deal with that in many different ways in terms of how we interact with other people, how we portray minorities in our media, in our culture. Honestly, I really don't know what the government can do about it. I really believe that this is issues that need to be worked out in civil society by civil discussion with one another. I believe sometimes, though, the government fans the flames by using identity politics for political means. So I think that we really need to get away from that in our politics.
Thank you. Susie, you're the last one here.
Thank you, Lorraine. Reality, like many things, this begins with me. My expectation of myself and anybody else around me is that we are respectful and we work in a safe and respectful environment, and we play in a safe and respectful environment for everybody that we meet. We mentor our young, we work with our young so that they know how to, so that everybody knows how to interact with each other and also know how to call each other on inappropriate behavior. We accept people as they are, as they present themselves to us, and we work with them. And that is something that is very important to me. I work in the healthcare field. There has been many, many different things go on, and slowly but surely we have worked through that, and we've become a lot stronger because of it. I am a representative and an advocate and in all aspects of my life, and will continue to do that for the people of North Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last speaker on that question, and now you have the opportunity to ask questions of one another. So let's start with Harrison.
All right, so sorry to clarify, I have opportunities to ask two different questions to two different candidates?
Yes, so you have two questions to two different people.
Okay, my first question would be to Jane. So it is well known that Vancouver's affordability crisis started under the BC Liberals' watch. Under the Liberals, housing prices skyrocketed, calls to improve social supports were ignored, and life became unaffordable for many Vancouverites. In addition, the Liberals have now adopted a campaign strategy centered on spreading fear around homeless people. So my question is, based on your record and campaign, how can British Columbians trust you when we are in a great economic downturn of our time, and when more than ever, people of Vancouver, Metro Vancouver and beyond are worried about income, affordability, and equity?
Thank you, Harrison. Homelessness has gone up, actually, under the NDP. And in fact, since 2017, it's gone up 21% in North Vancouver alone. So this is a very serious issue, and it is related to affordability. And I think that our plan with regards to helping people get secure, mental health and addictions obviously is also part of the issue. We prefer to give people wraparound supports, and that includes help with mental health and addictions so that they have a decreased chance of going homeless. And I fully believe that wraparound supports that don't just house people in facilities are absolutely vital to ensure that people get back on their feet.
Thank you. Your second question goes to who, Harrison?
Yeah, I have a question for Susie now.
Okay.
So one of the main justifications that the BC NDP has used for doubling down on the fracked LNG gas industry is that if we export it to Asian countries like China, it will displace the use of coal. In a meeting that I had with Environment Minister George Heyman last year, he admitted that the NDP have not done any studies to show that this is the case. Many experts agree that exporting fracked gas will stop the development of renewable energy in Asian countries such as China. How do you personally justify the government subsidies to the LNG gas industry while we are facing an existential climate crisis?
You're
You're
muted,
Susie.
My apologies. Sorry about that. Thanks, Harrison, for the question. The LNG industry was initially started as, or not initially started, but the Liberals had an awful lot to do with the initiation of the LNG industry. And at this point, I hear what you're saying about the studies showing that China is not going to benefit from LNG, from getting it from us, and it's not going to promote anything. And I believe there are studies being done towards other options and towards making sure that the LNG industry is still moving as a transitionary phase towards more clean and effective environmental ways of getting energy and maintaining energy. So that it's in progress. It's not there yet. We've got lots of work to do, but we will work towards it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I rebut that? I don't know what
Yeah.
the rules are. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that a recent report from Stand.Earth found that taxpayer subsidies to the fossil fuel industry have increased by 79% under this recent BC NDP government over Christy Clark's previous government. And also just wanted to highlight that
Uh-oh.
Forgot
Thank you,
my second
Harrison.
point
You made
there,
me feel
but
much better. Okay. Yes, I hear what you have to say, and I don't have the things at my fingertips to be able to respond to that. However, I do highly realize that the NDP government is continuing on ongoing efforts to move towards a cleaner energy methods. Thanks.
yeah, sorry, my second point was just that I find it interesting that the NDP had gone ahead with these increased subsidies without having the studies to back them up. Like when I met with the Environment Minister Heyman, he said that they were working on studies now. I asked, why didn't you do these studies before you increase this taxpayer subsidy to the industry? And he didn't really have an answer to that. So
I'm really glad that you got to talk to Minister Heyman, because his capacities are much higher than mine, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Clayton, would you like to ask a couple of questions?
Sure. Question for Susie first. What conditions would prompt the NDP to lift the state of emergency?
I would suggest that when COVID is under control in a way that Dr. Henry and Adrian Dix and John Horgan, assuming that they're in the same positions they are now, feel that it is an appropriate and effective time that we can continue with the recovery plan, and we can say that COVID is under control and not the threat that it is at this time. Thank you.
Can I rebut that or ask a subsequent?
Yes.
Like, what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of case numbers or death rates? I mean, as far as I could see, we're not currently in a pandemic. Like there was a pandemic definitely in March and April. There was excess mortality that was noticeable in the COVID deaths. Now it is not. It is really on par with a normal flu season. So is there some kind of metric that your government would use to make the decision to restore our liberties and allow life to get back to normal?
Lorraine, am I okay to respond to that?
Yes.
Okay, Clayton, a pandemic means the world, okay? It is not just BC. We have a situation throughout our world that is unprecedented in our modern times that we are dealing with. We work with the WHO, we work with the federal government, we work with governments all over the world. We're seeing amazing work being done to try and manage and eradicate something that has become a threat around the world. We are doing well in BC. You're right. Our numbers are not the same as other places. And that's because of a lot of work done by somebody who knows what she's doing and has taken a lead and has been able to take that lead because our government has supported her. I would not be saying that we were clear of COVID until we got the direction accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a second question, Clayton?
Yes, I do, for Jane.
Okay.
So my question is, in your opinion, how much government is too much? Or phrased differently, are there any domains of human life that you feel government should not tread on?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've never been asked that before. I think the way that our party views things is it's a combination. We want to stimulate innovation, support people by reducing taxes to allow them to spend money themselves without having to be overly taxed. But at the same time, certainly healthcare and education are the top sectors that should not be reduced at all, and that we have to support our public education system and our public health system. So I absolutely think that it's a balance, and that that's how the BC Liberals has governed so far.
I'm sorry, I gotta follow this up. I mean, you gave me lots of examples of areas where you think government should be involved. I just want one or two where you think government should not be involved. Just one or two examples.
Well, one example is auto insurance. We have proposed a choice model. So as opposed to having ICBC being a monopoly, we have proposed that there's a choice in the system so that you can open it up so people can investigate private insurance. So I think that's probably a good example. I think it'll make auto.
I'm happy. I'll take that. Would be very happy if we get rid of ICBC's monopoly.
Susie, your turn.
Sorry, am I able to rebut that point? I don't know what the rules are around
Okay,
ICBC.
just a moment, Susie.
Yeah, so my point is just I'm very worried about the idea of privatizing car insurance and the effect it will have on young people. There's not a lot of reasons why a private company would want to cover young people, because we are a high-risk group. And having a fully public car insurance has allowed young people to pay lower costs for car insurance. So I worry that the private industry would have no interest in providing car insurance for young people. ICBC would end up just covering young people, and the costs of car insurance for young people would skyrocket. So I'd be really interested to see whether the Liberals have done any studies into whether privatizing car insurance would actually reduce the cost for young people. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison. Susie, your questions.
Yes, please. I have, my first question is for Jane. Jane, as a community health nurse, I've seen firsthand the damage that the BC Liberals did when they fired over 10,000 workers and left care homes dangerously understaffed and put our seniors at risk. Why should anybody trust you and or the Liberals to take care of our seniors and our general health now?
Thank you for the question, Susie. The platform is quite aggressive when it comes to seniors care. And in addition to doing an entire review, a COVID review on how the pandemic was handled, I personally dealt with a lot of family members who had their elderly family members in Lynn Valley Care Home. It was the central part at the beginning of COVID. And it was tragic, the amount of people that I talked to that were watching this unfold. So for sure, there needs to be a total review on long-term care facilities. And the platform has said that we want to focus on getting everybody a private room if they want, and also to give incentives to keep seniors at home longer. So tax credits for supportive care, along with the independent review. I think that that's a good start for our seniors care.
Thank you very much. Second question, Susie?
Second question is actually also for Jane. Thank you. Young women deserve a province that encourages them to take on leadership roles without fear of sexism. You have apologized for the sexist comments you made on the controversial video, but what have you done to make amends to young women, people of color, or voters in this riding who may have been offended by those remarks?
Thank you for the question. Yes, I reiterated my apology. I felt bad. They were insensitive and stupid. And as I said, I've been beating myself up because of it ever since. I do have 2 daughters, and I pride myself in being a positive role model for them. With regards to encouraging women into the political arena, I have been a mentor for not only women to actually put their names on a ballot, but many of the people that work with me and work for me are young, successful women that are benefiting from my leadership in that regard. I think you mentioned racism. I'm absolutely against anything that would negatively influence somebody from getting into any work based on their race or their sex. It's unbelievable that does happen, but I certainly have a record of supporting everybody for equal access to all jobs, regardless of sex or race.
Okay, Jane, it's your turn. Who would you like to ask a question of?
Oh, thank you. My question is for Harrison. Your leader plus your former leader, Andrew Weaver, and Adam signed a deal in June 2017 to form a coalition government that would have you all stay in power until the fixed election date, October 2021. For the past 3 years, your party has voted consistently on every bill with the NDP, and you voted for the budget all the time, even going against sometimes your principles. And just 2 years ago, we were all forced into a PR referendum because nobody apparently wanted a majority. Well, here we are in a snap election. So how do you feel about the betrayal you are experiencing, throwing us all into an unnecessary election a year earlier than your party legislated, because the NDP now wants to have complete control with the majority government and ultimately wants your party defeated?
Yeah, so a couple quick points of clarification. It was not a coalition government. It was the conscience and supply agreement. It was not a coalition government. And also, we did not vote with the NDP on everything. We voted against them on subsidies to LNG. We voted against them on Site C. We voted against them on the couple of bills that came up during the pandemic, which were both used as excuses by the NDP for calling the election. So yes, absolutely, we were betrayed by the NDP government. They broke the agreement that they had signed with us, and have yet to come up with any good explanations for why they did that, why it made sense, and no justifications have they been able to come up with for why they broke the agreement with the Greens. They've come up with excuses such as that we didn't support them on $10 a day childcare. That was because we were pushing for free childcare. So every excuse they've come up with has not made any sense to me. And yeah, they did betray us. And when it comes to the results after this election, we're going to just have to look into what is best for our party.
Jane, did you want to rebut that? You do have one more question.
Can I rebut and add another question?
Well, you can rebut Harrison's comments and
Okay.
then ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for Harrison, and he wasn't there, so I know that he doesn't really know this. But no, the Greens voted 100% in all budget bills, which included LNG and Site C and everything else, 100%. They did not want to vote against the NDP to bring down the government. And the 2 bills that you're talking about that the Greens were against was not a vote. As a matter of fact, what happened is that it was First Nations groups who spoke out against Bill 22 and Bill 19 because it went against UNDRIP. And so the NDP pulled the bills from the legislature. It was not a vote. But other than that, I guess what I'm concerned about is how the Greens feel. And actually your former leader, Andrew Weaver, who's also betrayed you because now he's chumming up with John Horgan. How do you feel about being betrayed by this government that you were governing with?
I can respond to that. So yeah, we did vote with the NDP on budget bills. We did not vote with them on all of the confidence motions that came up. We did vote with the NDP. We did not vote with them 100% on everything else. So yeah, there was a betrayal, and we're going to have to re-examine after this election what our relationships with the other parties look like, what we would be willing to do, what concessions we would want if we were to be supporting either party in a similar way as we did with the confidence and supply agreement. And yeah, we have a different leader now. Sonia Furstenau has brought the party in a brand new direction, and I'm really excited for that and what that could bring under a new government. And what the BC Greens are going to be able to do going forward. We're going to be taking things in a different direction under a different leader.
Thank you. Time for your second question, Jane. Who do you wish to give it to?
Oh, thank you, Lorraine. It's for Susie.
Okay.
Homelessness has gone up under the NDP, and so has taxes, housing prices, rent, strata insurance, overdose deaths, crime, vandalism, assaults, business theft and break-ins, open drug use, drug paraphernalia on schools and playgrounds, human waste deposited on sidewalks and alleyways have all gone up. And just this weekend, a woman was beaten with a pipe in front of her own home in Strathcona. So my question is to Susie. The NDP candidate for Vancouver North Mount Pleasant has said that tent cities should be sanctioned and permanent. The Strathcona tent city is the largest tent city in the entire country with 400 tents. Will you be supporting permanent tent cities in North Vancouver, and what neighborhood do you propose that they should go?
You're muted, Susie.
Let's try that again.
Okay.
Thank you, Jane. Really tough question. We actually have people that are living under bridges now. We have people that are living in our forests now, and in our parks. Some of our parks have people living in them. I think the overall problem of homelessness is very hard on our entire population. It is very, very difficult for the people that are homeless. It is very difficult for the people that are trying to do something about it, and it is very difficult for the other people that are impacted. And it is a problem that has many, many levels to it. A simple answer to this is not something that I can give you. I can't say, do I support a tent city in North Vancouver? There isn't one now. I do not anticipate that we are going to be looking for that type of solution to our homelessness in our area. But there is so many different things going on that I cannot respond to that effectively. So thank you for the question, but I don't have a real answer for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. That was interesting.
Oh, we have a rebuttal.
Oh, okay, Jane.
It's not really a rebuttal, Lorraine. It's just I've visited a lot of cities. It's not just Vancouver. It's Terrace. It's Victoria. It's Nanaimo. We have a huge issue in this province that needs to be dealt with, and homelessness and mental health and addictions are often very much combined. And I guess what I'm looking for is some ideas from Susie with regards to how to solve this, because these people need our help. They're vulnerable, and what we're doing right now is not working, because it's not helping the vulnerable people in our society, but it's also not helping the neighbors. And Strathcona is one of those areas in Vancouver that is really suffering right now. So I just wanted to know from Susie if she had any thoughts about solutions on how to help these people who are most vulnerable and need our attention.
Thank you. We'll now go back to
Can I rebut
Oh,
that?
yes, of course.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that, yeah, definitely the NDP have failed on issues around homelessness, mental health addictions, but these are all issues that were created under the BC Liberal government. They were in power for 16 years and didn't seem to care about these issues until the NDP got in power. Now they're all up in arms about these issues, attacking the NDP on them, but they didn't make almost any progress when they were in power. All of these issues got worse under the BC Liberal government. They have continued in many cases to get worse under the BC NDP government, but both parties are equally, well, no, both parties aren't equally to blame here. The Liberals are mainly to blame for starting these crises. The NDP have not done enough to solve it, absolutely, but the Liberals, these crises all started under them.
You done? Okay, thanks.
Can I just add one thing?
Oh,
to that, if you don't
sure,
mind?
yes, jump in.
Come on, Harrison. The Liberals are responsible for mental health problems. Come on, these are deep-seated issues that stem from all sorts of, personal demons and various societal conditions. You can't. I realize this is a debate and we got to play politics here, but come on, it's not the NDP's fault and it's not the Liberals' fault. But maybe there are better approaches.
Harrison,
Yeah,
keep it quick.
That. Yes. Well, if you look at the root causes of why a lot of people are struggling with mental health, it's the fact that they are stressed about their housing situation, stressed about being able to pay for food and rent, pay their bills for the next month. Some people have developed dependencies on opioids, and that drug supply has been poisoned. The BC Liberal government did not do anything to address that. So yes, the BC Liberals did not cause mental health problems, but they failed to solve a lot of the root causes of these problems.
Okay.
Answer.
Good. So now we'll go back to the questions submitted from our community association members. And I'm going to start with Jane. 1 minute. The BC Wildlife Act is outdated and many North Vancouver residents are upset at the standard operating procedures of the Conservation Department, resulting in the unnecessary death of many animals, primarily bears. If you are elected or re-elected, what is your position on the current practice and policies, and what will you do to change them?
Thank you very much for the question. I was very saddened to hear about the death of huckleberry as well as plum. And I agree with the question that it was needless and preventable and unnecessary. I have talked to the District of North Vancouver about ways that they could increase the fines for keeping out bear attractants. As well as talked to the Ministry of Environment on how they can do a better job of updating conservation officers' bear management regimes. Because if they don't know the bears, they don't know which bears are problem bears and which bears are cohabitating with us. And I think that we need to do a complete overhaul on the black bear management regimes in the province, and in particular North Vancouver and Coquitlam, that have a lot of bears that we live with.
Okay. Harrison.
Yes, this is an issue that's dear to my heart. Growing up in Lynn Valley, we had a fruit tree in our backyard. Our neighbors behind us had fruit trees in their yard. So we would see the bears coming into our yard every summer. I've watched them walk along, like this massive bear walk along a little 2x4 on top of a fence. I've watched them play with our garden hose and balls in our backyard. They're beautiful, magnificent, gentle creatures. I've like turned the corner around the side of our house, ran into a bear like 6 feet away from me, just turned around, walked away. They're magnificent, gentle creatures. Right now, people are not educated on how to deal with them, how to keep calm around them, how to not attract them to your yard. We need to be doing more.
15 seconds, sorry.
Yeah, we need to be doing more both to educate people and to enforce fines for people who are leaving out bear attractants in their yards.
Thank you. Clayton.
I don't really know enough about the conservation branch's operating procedures to really comment intelligently on this question. So what I will do is put my email address in the chat if no one minds, and then the person who posed the question, feel free to email me, tell me what you think reforms would help improve on this issue.
Okay, and Susie.
I realize this is highly unusual in a debate, but I actually agree with both Harrison and Jane that the community, first off, has a responsibility to manage its behavior in such a way that we can interact effectively and interface effectively with our with the forest that we are so very close to and that we value so much. I think that the parks, I agree with Jane, and I think that the parks regulations need to be reviewed, and we need to come up with a solution that is appropriate for our community, as well as being effective in other areas, because that's one of the challenges with being a large province with a lot of diversity, is that you try to create something that works everywhere and it's not effective all the way across. So there's a lot of room to go. I noticed the municipality has actually done a lot of work already towards reducing the bear attractants and encouraging people, including fines, etc. And there's a lot more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We currently have 2 North Shore crossings, both of which are under provincial jurisdiction. The Lionsgate Bridge, which is part of Highway 99 and is an 80-year-old structure, and the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge, which is part of Highway 1 and is a youngster at 60 years old. What will you do if elected to advance the discussion about the inevitable replacement of both spans? And let's start that one with Clayton.
Again, that's a kind of a specialist technical question. I don't know. I guess we should perhaps commission a report, but both of those bridges had recent upgrades. So we just really need to know, like, is this within the next decade or next 30 years? I don't vote Libertarian, and I'll get a seat in the legislature, and I'll think about it.
Thanks. Harrison, go for it.
Yeah, so similarly, I'm not an engineer. I don't know, I'm not an expert around the specifics of when bridges need to be replaced, what that's going to look like. But yeah, I think that they're really, really crucial pieces of infrastructure for our community. And we already see that they aren't providing enough, like with the traffic that people are stuck in every day. We, if anything, need more infrastructure crossing Burrard Inlet. So the BC government, I would absolutely support earmarking whatever money is needed to maintain those bridges, potentially replace them in the future, explore a third rapid transit connection across Burrard Inlet. And yeah, the BC government needs to be planning ahead, making sure that the money is there for when those things need to happen.
You done?
Yeah.
Thank you. Susie.
As always, with any kind of major structures, ongoing and regular reviews need to be made as to their safety and efficacy in providing the service that they're supposed to provide. Both the Lionsgate Bridge, as Clayton said, both the Lionsgate Bridge and the Ironworkers Memorial have received significant upgrades in the last couple of years. And a third crossing is being assessed and potentially worked towards. So the work of maintaining and upgrading bridges, again, needs to be left to the people that know what they're doing and know what they're assessing and know what they're looking for, which we do have effective people within the various the transport ministry to do. So I wouldn't say that I'm going to have a lot of information on that at this time. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Jane.
Sorry about that noise. It was my dog in the background, so that's why I muted myself. Yeah, I mean, the North Shore, basically, we're reliant on these two bridges. And we all know that the number one issue on the North Shore is traffic and transportation. And as much as I would like to say that we need a wider Second Narrows Bridge, I'm not too sure whether or not the priorities are on that right now in the Ministry of Transportation, but we're eventually going to need an upgrade there. But in the meantime, we really do need to focus on getting rapid transit to the North Shore at the Second Narrows. And that's why I've been a real advocate for, incentivizing people to get out of their cars with rapid transit. And but we are going to have to do something about that bridge.
Thank you. The NDP government launched a September back to school model for K-12 students. The model is based on a classroom cohort system. What do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of the cohort model? And we'll start with Harrison.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff around this back to school plan was left to teachers and admin to figure out with a week, couple weeks to figure this out. And yeah, so there needed to be more funding in place ahead of that. I've talked to numerous students who are in high school right now who feel very unsafe in their classroom, whether it's because not all the students in their grade are wearing masks at school, whether it's because there's a constant worry about my cohort is 60 people. That's a lot of people. Each of those 60 people has maybe another 50 people in their bubble. We have one of our candidates running in Vancouver as a teacher. She talked about how she has her cohort of 60 people. Her husband is a teacher. He has his cohort of 60 people. She has 2 kids, each of whom have their cohorts of 60 people. Together that becomes like 240 people, which becomes a massive group. So I think we need to really be re-examining the back to school
I cheated
system.
you. I cheated you. You got 15 seconds.
Yeah, we really need to be listening to parents, admin, teachers, students, the concerns they have, and making sure that the money is there to ensure that our teachers and students are safe in schools. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Same question to Clayton.
So yeah, it's difficult to know what the right procedure is for limiting virus transmission within schools. There are probably a lot of different tactics and approaches that could be effective. I think what we need is not a monolithic model that we impose right across the province, because what if that model is wrong? I think we need a diversity of approaches. I think we need to allow school districts and individual schools to experiment with different models, not just when it comes to keeping kids safe in schools, but when it comes to keeping them educated. Because our public education system is good in some regards, is performing well, in other regards maybe not so much, and it doesn't work well for every student. So we need choice in education. So the BC Libertarian Party is proposing that funding be directed by parents to the school that their kids want to go.
Thank you. Jane.
Yes, thank you for the question, and timely, because we just heard that there was an outbreak actually at Sea Cove School in our riding. But we've been pretty consistent, and I had lots of parents and teachers talk to me that were afraid of taking their kids back to school because of safety. So I'm a real fan of a hybrid model. Some school districts have been doing it, but not all. And the reason being is because the funding model currently set by the Ministry of Education doesn't allow for it. So I would advocate for a rehaul on that funding model to allow for hybrid options, so that parents could learn, or kids could learn online, but not give up their spot in their bricks and mortar school, and definitely rejuvenate the independent school or online learning through independent distributed learning that was cut by the NDP just before COVID.
Thank you. Susie.
Thanks, Lorraine. So the question was originally around what are we feeling on the cohort model? As everybody is aware, the pandemic and COVID were not even in our thoughts or on our radar a year ago summertime. And then when it struck, we would never have assumed that it was going to impact the way it did. And it grew very quickly. And we had to take measures very quickly in order to make sure that the COVID had a reduced impact on British Columbia. The measures that have been brought in place have been our guidelines based on the medical health officer's recommendations, and they're put together with the individual school boards and the individual health authorities. Thank you. And so the cohort method is a method that is being established for now, and everything is being looked at very carefully to see how effective it is and where it needs to be changed. And those are ongoing, those reviews. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we have a question that I'm going to start with Clayton. The government is currently growing the deficit to fund programs that provide support to people and businesses affected by the pandemic. In your opinion, what would be the most productive spending strategies to encourage economic health going forward?
I guess you could predict my answer by now on this one. Ending the lockdown. I mean, come on, let's get back to normal. Let's get those people back to work. Let's get those businesses out of the doldrums so that they can start employing people, they can start generating revenue as well as tax revenue for the government. I mean, this idea that we need to completely shut down the economy or even partially shut it down, it just doesn't make sense. Let's focus on protecting the most vulnerable people and letting the rest of society get back to normal. If we don't do this, we're going to be in for years and years of just heavy debt. We can't keep going indefinitely with spending programs to support the victims of bad government policy.
You done? Okay. Jane, please.
Yeah, I really think, and I think I've mentioned this before, that we need to do a concerted effort in supporting our small businesses. They are the economic driver in our communities, and they also employ our local people. And during COVID, things were not good. I mean, some of the business were forced to close, like hair salons, for instance, because of COVID, but they still had to pay rent. And particularly in the area of the Lynn Valley Village, where my office is, many of these businesses were suffering, and we need to really help them. And so in our platform, we do have help for small businesses to eliminate the small business income tax, as well as tourism. We will provide a loan guarantee program for them to save not just their businesses, but also the 19,000 employees that work in the tourism industry.
Thanks very much. Susie.
I'll get you to repeat the question, please, Lorraine.
Yep. The government is currently growing the deficit to fund programs that provide support to people and businesses affected by the pandemic. In your opinion, what would be the most productive spending strategies to encourage economic health going forward?
Okay, well, the BC NDP government, if re-elected, is proposing that we are going to provide households with $1,000 and individuals with $500 in order to get money back into the hands of the people who spend locally and who work locally. Which will in turn stimulate small businesses and be refreshed and bring the customers back to some extent. We're also looking at rent management in having a $400 rent rebate, and also having relief for renters in terms of capping rents and also capping rents in the second year and freezing rents in 2021. Both of those things will put money back in the pockets of everyday people and allow them to be part of the ongoing trade for the small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there are a number of strategies that I would support this. So the BC Greens, we plan to earmark $500 million for rent support, and to work towards making sure that nobody is paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. I'm also very supportive of ideas like free early childhood care. That would really give young parents, single parents, the opportunity to get back to work and not have to worry about that, give them some more money in their pocket to be spending at local small businesses. The same thing with making public transit free for people under 18. It gives people more money in their pockets that they could be spending. Young people are a big driver of business for our small businesses, as are students. And yeah, looking at these long-term solutions that will not only benefit our community in the short term now, but will benefit it for decades to come. Yeah.
Thanks so much. This is our final question before you give your closing comments. Due to COVID-19, the provincial government required day passes when hiking provincial parks, including Mount Seymour, until October the 1st. The intention was to limit the number of users on these trails, which happened. However, the unintended consequence was that many hikers and bikers instead chose to go and use the trails maintained by the District of North Vancouver. So now they're a bit overpopulated. If in government, will your party again require day passes for using Mount Seymour Provincial Park next spring, assuming that we still have COVID in our midst? Jane.
Yes, I did get calls about this, and I think everything has to be more coordinated, because when you've got like different jurisdictions of parks in our beautiful riding that we have, if you're closing one park, then you're just going to squish people for another park. So it absolutely all needs to be coordinated. And so that would be the municipalities, Metro Vancouver, as well as the province, because those are the ones that generally have the jurisdictions of our parklands. So I would make a suggestion. I've done this before in other issues of getting together the players and coming down with a solution, particularly in this riding that is got arguably the highest percentage of conservation and parks per capita, or per geography rather, than any in the riding. So it's definitely a key issue.
Thank you. Clayton.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear one of our attendees asking a question with the word unintended consequences in it, because these are just rife during this heavy-handed measures that the government has imposed during this pandemic. So this is one of them, like a relatively minor one, and it just goes to show you that it's not possible for policymakers to really figure out what all the different knock-on effects of some sort of restrictive measure like this is going to be. We need to tone down the fear, and we need to tone down the hubris, and we need to look at evidence, and we need to make public policy based on things that we can really measure. Like, don't just be reactionary and start banning stuff because you think, oh, maybe it might do some good. No, let's take a measured approach and look at the evidence.
Thank you. Susie.
Thanks, Lorraine. In the case of Mount Seymour, this will be something that will be re-examined. The question was, will it be put in place next spring? And as was pointed out, is if COVID is in the state or in a worse state that we're dealing with, everything will be re-examined and looked at from the way that, from what has occurred. They'll look at the information that is brought back from instituting that this time, and then a decision will be made in conjunction with the community. Again, as Jane has stated, We need everybody to come to the table and try and figure out solutions. We cannot just institute something based on one person or one body's decision. It has to be a combined work of the impacted folks and the various agencies that hold responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Harrison.
Yeah, so this is definitely an interesting issue. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm fully supportive. Our government needs to be doing a lot more work, working closely with Metro Vancouver, with District of North Vancouver, City of North Vancouver. And yeah, everyone really needs to be at the table together. So if a problem like this comes up, it can be dealt with quickly, because things are evolving quickly during this pandemic. Measures will have to be taken, and we need to make sure that they aren't having unintended consequences, especially something like this when we really want to be encouraging people to be getting outside, be in our parks, be exercising, enjoying our beautiful nature that we have in our backyard here. So yeah, I would absolutely support making sure that all levels of government are working together really closely on this and future pandemic measures to make sure that there are no unintended consequences, and if there are, that they're addressed really quickly.
Future pandemics, that's kind of scary. The last speaker is,
I think we've all spoken.
oh, you've all spoken. That's good. That's good. Okay, so now it's time for your closing comments, and I'm going to start with Harrison. 2 minutes.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you to everyone for joining tonight and listening in. It was a pleasure to discuss all these issues with the other candidates. So yeah, just to reiterate, I am really committed to bringing solutions to this community. We are facing a number of crises, whether it's around affordable housing, climate, traffic congestion, overdoses, and mental health. These are all issues that really need to be addressed and have been neglected by our government for a number of decades. So I'm running to bring real solutions to these things. I'm running to work closely with the community, with other levels of government, to ensure that the help is in need for people who are struggling, and that we are building a community that is going to be more resilient, stronger for whatever future crises we are facing. I'm really committed to making sure that the money is there, invested in all of our systems, all of our institutions, because that's what's needed right now. What's needed is an investment in transitioning our economy to a stronger, more just economy, one that is dependent on renewable energy and not fossil fuels, one that is going to be able to carry us forward for the next 50 years, the next 100 years. And yeah, if anyone is looking to find out more information about me, my website is harrisonjohnston.ca. I'm on all social media at harrison4nv. And yeah, I'm regardless of the outcome of the election, I'm going to be here in the community fighting for what I believe in, ensuring that young people, that everyone in our community has a real future, that no one like me is will be forced to leave the community because they cannot afford to live here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Clayton.
So I just want to preface my comments by saying that I recognize that COVID-19 presents threats, that there's risk. There's people that die, there's people that contract the virus and then have long-term conditions that they, perhaps organ damage and so on. There's still some things we don't understand about this virus. But my point is that when the government wants to take away your basic freedoms and to do so apparently indefinitely, the burden of proof is on them to justify that what they're doing, number one, is working. And they haven't done that. I mean, there's studies, you can look at one in the Lancet that was released in August that showed no decreased mortality associated with lockdown measures. So, I mean, the studies are, we now have 6 months of evidence of pursuing the strategy of lockdowns, and we can start to see the data, and it doesn't look very good. As I said, the World Health Organization is now going back on its original position and saying that maybe these lockdowns do more harm than good. Dr. Matt Strauss wrote an article in The Spectator, which is just excellent. What he said there is that if lockdowns were a drug, the FDA would not approve them. You know how with drugs, you have all these side effects and, you know, consequences, you know, put you at risk of suicide. Well, this is where we need to apply the Hippocratic Oath in public policy, because if lockdowns were a drug, they would never pass Health Canada approval because there's so many negative unintended consequences. So what do we need to do? We need to lift the state of emergency. We need to get life back to normal. We can keep some measures in place, like the health orders for long-term care homes, where COVID really is and has been an issue. But we need the rest of our society to be able to get back to normal. You can find me at libertarian.bc.ca.
Thank you. Jane.
Just want to make sure I'm unmuted.
You are.
Okay, good. It's been an honor to serve the people of North Vancouver Seymour for the past 11 years, and I've lived on the North Shore almost all of my life. I was disappointed that we've been thrown into this unnecessary pandemic election when we should be in Victoria passing legislation to help people, communities, and businesses, rather than endlessly waiting for assistance that apparently is not coming until the end of the year or the beginning of the next year. Our residents deserve better, and our businesses need better now. This has been a tough election, but it's more important than ever during this unprecedented times that North Vancouver has a strong and local voice to represent them in Victoria. People who know me know that I have a solid record that proves I can do just that. I delivered valuable infrastructure to make life easier for people, and I am fighting for the most vulnerable in our community. And it is vitally important to have that voice, no matter if we become government or opposition. I've been successful for delivering in North Vancouver in both capacities, and I care deeply about this riding and ask for your support as MLA on October 24th. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie.
Again, I say thank you to everybody for spending some time with us this evening, and I say thank you to the group that has been on the panel tonight for our discussions. This is not a time for Andrew Wilkinson and the BC Liberals to take us backwards. Before COVID-19 hit, John Hogan and the BC NDP had beginning to fix many of the problems facing BC that were started through 16 years of the Liberal neglect. Such issues as that we have that Harrison has outlined so beautifully with our traffic congestion, housing affordability, and the people that are working here but cannot live here. We have many nurses that commute up to 2 hours a day to get here to work. We have to work on things together to solve these problems. I too am a representative and an advocate, and have been for many, many years. I'm also very much entrenched in our local area and have very deep roots in our riding. I absolutely will be a representative and an advocate of integrity. And I anticipate that I will be hearing people, working with people, and listening to people. And making sure that the information is transmitted and information is provided as is available to the people that we work with. I understand that as an MLA, it is absolutely important that we be transparent and working with the entire community, and I am able to do just that. I believe that we have a very diverse community and that it needs to be supported. October 24th, vote safely and vote Susie.